really fancy.
I mean,
Hi, I'm Julia. Oh, sorry. Oh, you know what? I don't have my thing set up. Hold on. Well, now we have a cold open.
yeah, I was gonna say, I'm in a world where I'm in pajama pants 100% of the time, so you're drinking from a glass. It's fancy.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
The podcast where we should all over our books.
For those not watching on YouTube, we're just doing great today.
Yeah.
Per usual.
Speaking of YouTube, I do want to say we've been having some technical difficulties getting the episodes up in a timely manner on YouTube, and I'm trying my best, but if you want to listen to the episodes as quickly as possible, you've probably already figured out that you should find them on the audio on either on our website, whatyoushouldread.com, or wherever you download podcasts. And I did just get last week's episode up yesterday on Saturday, so I'm pretty much caught up. So we'll do our best, but sorry about that.
YouTube's a pain in the butt.
It kind of is.
I mean,
yeah. So today we have a really fun episode. It's another book club episode. We will be discussing Klara and the Sun with Kazuo Ishiguro. We will be discussing Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro with a very special guest, not the author, but Angie Kim, who is a friend of ours and an author of Miracle Creek. And the reason we are excited to read this book is because of her review that she wrote. So we were super excited that she was available to join us.
Absolutely.
her review of that is so great, and I will put a link to it in the show notes.
Yep.
So even if you think that book sounds weird, it doesn't sound like my thing, it's an amazing book. You need to read it, and she says it better than anyone else can. So
yeah, and we're going to talk about it today with her. So very exciting. But first, Rachel, what are you reading?
My reading is all over the place. It's April 11th, and I have only finished 1 book this month.
Oh, that's odd for you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been working a lot, but I'm also reading a million books at once. So I am reading Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore, which is the 4th book in the Graceling Realm series. I've talked about this series so many times on this podcast. So I'm finally getting to the new one, and I'm really enjoying it. I am also reading Where the Light Enters by Sara Donati, which is sequel to The Gilded Hour, which I read last year. Actually talked about it on our first ever episode.
Oh, yeah.
So far enjoying that. I'm reading it on my Kindle, so I don't have it to show you all, but I also am listening to, my audiobook is The Beekeeper's Apprentice by Lori R. King, which was recommended to me by Kindred Spirit of the Pod, Becky Farrer. So, and it's like a continuation of the Sherlock Holmes series. It's about this woman named Mary, this young woman who sort of take it under his wing as an apprentice detective, and it's really fun.
That sounds fun. I love a detective book. Mm-hmm. Kelly, what are you reading?
Actually, similarly, I am reading Love and Crimes by Sarah Paretsky, best known for her detective series V.I. Warshawski. This is a collection of short stories that I am reading for no reason whatsoever, clearly not linked to an upcoming episode or anything like that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Really subtle.
I'm good at this.
I am reading The Happiest Girl on Earth. Is it The Happiest Girl on Earth or The Happiest Girl in the world. The Happiest Girl in the World, excuse me, by Alena Dillon. This was one of my April most anticipated, and I got the e-galley from NetGalley. So I was really excited, and I'm about 40% of the way through. And this is the one about the gymnasts and based on true events, basically. I mean, it is a novel, and she has this note at the beginning that's very like, it's basically like, these are all made up, but I mean, obviously these are real people. Like, it's just kind of like, you can't ignore it. I mean, so basically, if you don't know, the USA Gymnastics Federation had this huge scandal a couple years ago where gymnasts came forward and were finally believed that the doctor who treated all the elite gymnasts in the USA was sexually abusing them. And so he finally went to trial and justice was finally served. He's in prison, but I mean, it took a long time and a lot of girls were abused in the meantime. So this book is kind of about that. The main character, she is an elite gymnast and her best friend is being abused by this doctor. So it also is, some chapters are narrated by the mom of the main character. And it's just, I'm really enjoying it. Rachel, you'd like it. I mean, if you just want to nerd out about gymnastic stuff, I think you would really enjoy it. It's all gymnastics all the time, which is really fun. But I mean, it also has this other element to it. And I'm at the point where it's just infuriating to read, because especially now, this girl who's had to endure this for years since she was like 12, now she's like 15 or 16, and she's finally like finding her voice and tells people what's going on, and no one's believing her, no one's standing up for her. And it's infuriating. I read like 2 pages and then I walk away and like can't. So right now it's kind of hard to read. And the character of the mom of the main character, she's just so awful. She's like, at one point, the main character, she's a child too, right? And she doesn't know what her friend is really telling her at first. But then finally she's like, Mom, my friend told me this and it sounds bad, like she tells in a grown-up, like she should. And the mom's like, oh, she's just saying that to get attention. And so it's just like, it's so infuriating because everyone only cares about winning gymnastics meets. And it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
I can't. But I mean, it's good. I mean, yeah.
Wow. So today, this is rare. I usually intro book news, as you know, longtime listeners, but usually we discuss it beforehand. This time it is a 100% surprise. I'm very excited. I have 2 pieces of book news. The first is specifically for Mom of the Pod, Becky Hall, and for me. Later this month, there's going to be a free Stephen King film fest based on his short stories. Whoa. And he has a thing called the Stephen King like dollar baby, I think they call it, because he will sell the rights to his short stories to upcoming filmmakers for $1. So on April 23rd through the 25th, you can watch adaptations of so many of his short stories online, and it sounds amazing. I'm very excited. On Friday evening, they will show The Boogeyman, a story that made me so scared I cannot sleep with a closet door open. Wow. To this day, as a 41-year-old person,
wow.
Closet door has to be shut. But here's news for everybody. So Tessa Thompson is adapting The Secret Lives of Church Ladies for HBO Max. It will be a TV series, and she is going to produce, so will the writer, the author, Disha Filia. Yes. I wrote it down. You may have seen on Instagram, my handwriting is not great. But she wrote the book. She will also executive produce and be one of the writers for the series. Nice. There is no release date, but this was just announced, and I'm really excited.
Cool. That book was amazing. I read it a couple weeks ago. So, that's exciting.
I need to read that.
Yes, we will be talking about it next week.
Oh, great book news, Kat.
Yeah.
Thank you. I found good news for a change.
Yay.
Don't get used to it, but it's good for right now.
We all know the book world can't stop with the shenanigans, so it is nice to have a week of positive book news.
Yeah, it's nice to have a
true.
break.
Yeah. All right, so the next segment is recent acquisitions, where we talk about the books we have recently bought, borrowed, or been given. So Kelly, why don't you start us off?
Okay, so non-book related, I had a birthday and I also acquired the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccination, so I'm fully vaccinated. And in celebration of both of those things, I got a lot of stuff. First, book adjacent, I got this really cute bookmark that my friend Kathy had commissioned. It's a little magnetic bookmark. Can you, I'll send a picture. But it's Carrie Mulligan from Promising Young Woman. There are only 2 of them that have been made that I know of so far. One is mine, one is Kathy's. So this is like a one-of-a-kind thing. It's my favorite of the Oscar movies this year. It's adorable and I love it. What is also adorable and I love is my birthday present from Julia. It is a book sleeve and it is David Rose.
Back it up. Can you back it up a little? Yeah, there you go.
I'm trying very hard not to connect with people right now. I have been vaccinated, but I continue to try very hard not to connect with people right now. Still me, still want to be left alone. Also, with actual books now, friends of mine gave me Game Changer, the new Neal Shusterman. It looks amazing. I'm very excited. Yes, you can borrow when I'm done, Julia. I saw that very excited face. And Jenny Lawson's You Are Here, which I guess is her 3rd book. I found out about this recently, and her 4th just came out on April 6th, which I also got. And let's see. Okay. The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. Thank you, Rachel. That looks amazing. I cannot wait to read it. The Last Bookshop of London by Madeline Martin and Shaking the Gates of Hell by John Archibald, which my friend Kimberly gave me. Between the Bliss and Me by Lizzy Mason and A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. That sounds so great. It's definitely going to be coming up on the podcast soon because I'm hoping to read it, but it just sounds completely amazing. So.
Yay.
It's been a big week for me in books.
That's awesome. The Lamplighters. I feel like you've talked about that one before, Rach.
I saw it on BookTube. I think Emma talked about it on Book Break. But yeah, it's like mysterious, but also like historical fiction kind of.
Yep.
Seems kind of creepy, and yeah, it looks good.
It looks amazing. Very excited.
Well, I on Easter there was a sale on ebooks on Kindle, so I picked up a few. I picked up The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I picked up Unbirthday, which is one of the Disney Twisted Tales. It's the Alice in Wonderland retelling.
I saw it at Target today.
Oh yeah, these were all like $3 on Easter, so I just grabbed a bunch. A book called Milkfed by Melissa Broder. This one I had not really heard much about, but I think it's a fairly new release, and it doesn't look that long, and I can't even remember what it's about right now. I think it's about a woman, just like her life. I have no idea what it's about, obviously. But it sounded funny when I read the description, and it was an impulse buy. And then I also picked up Shipped by Angie Hockman, which is described as the Unhoneymooners meets the Hating Game. Yeah, so a rom-com. So it was exciting. And then I also, at work, we're starting a book club. So we're going to read books, about work stuff and topics that will be helpful to us in our job. I'm in marketing. So I picked up Everybody Writes by Anne Handley. And what I love about this, it says it's your go-to guide to creating ridiculously good content. So that'll be, I think, helpful. And also every chapter is super short, and every chapter also seems like super helpful to what I do at work. So I'm very excited to read it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good haul. I acquired a lot of things in the last couple of weeks. I 2 Kindle books, well, actually several, but I think I talked about that I got the Beverly Cleary books last episode. But I also got on Easter, I got Dark Tides by Philippa Gregory on Kindle because that was on sale. And that's the second book in her Fair Mile series. And then I also, the other day, of course, Kindle, so good at this. They sent me, here's a $3 coupon on any of these Kindle books. So I looked through, I was like, well, we'll see if there's any that look good. And this one did, and it was only $3.99. So I only paid 99 cents. It's called Enchantress by James Maxwell. It's the first in the Everman saga. And it looks like cheesy fantasy adventure book, and I'm all about that. So, you know, a lot of it's really highly rated on Goodreads, like 3.99. But there were a lot of 1-star reviews of like, oh, this book was so annoying, and I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah,
it looks fun.
One person's annoying can be like your favorite book. So
right, yeah. So I got it. And then for physical books, I got Gold Diggers by Sanjana Savian. And it is one of my April most anticipated. It just came out this past Tuesday, and the cover looks really good. And it's got like lemons on it. It's really cute. So I'm excited about that. And then my Book of the Month box came, and I got 3 books. And they are Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. And that looks really fun. And I got Love in Color by Bolu Babalola. And it's mythical tales from around the world retold. So it's like short story retellings. And then I got Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Woolley, which is like a YA fantasy based on like Indigenous Native American folklore, I guess. And yeah, it looks really good. So I got a lot of things.
My Book of the Month has not come yet.
Some of mine came, one did not. Bonus book news. Mindy Kaling is going to adapt Gold Diggers. That was also just announced.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And, yes. And Arsenic and Adobo, your copy might be missing the last page, but it's just a recipe. And if it is, it's all over the Facebook Book of the Month group.
Oh, interesting.
I heard about that. Yeah, the last page of a recipe was missing. I haven't checked.
Hey. The suspense is killing me.
I know.
Oh,
apparently,
yeah, it is.
It was like some people apparently have, What do we oil?
Boil the what?
Well, great haul. So now we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Angie Kim, and we're going to be discussing Klara and the Sun. And so stick around.
You know what you should read.
It's time for what you should read.
And we are back, and we are joined by our friend and author, Angie Kim. Hi, Angie. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for asking me to be part of this. I love this book, so I'm so excited to be able to get to discuss it with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited too. I mean, the reason that we chose this book for a book club is because of the review you posted of it on Goodreads, and we all follow you on Goodreads. And I think you posted it late last year, maybe, because I had it as one of my top 5 most anticipated books of the year because of the review that you wrote. I said, oh, this sounds amazing. And when we got around to thinking, oh, we should make this a book club pick, we were really excited that you wanted to come on and talk about it with us.
Oh, I'm so glad about that. I mean, you certainly didn't need me to tell you that this is going to be a great read. And it's, I think, because it's Ishiguro's first novel since winning the Nobel. So I think, you know, so I think this has been anticipated by like everyone everywhere, and certainly by me. The minute I got it, I started reading it. So
No, I never would have picked it up had you not recommended it.
right.
No, I think I didn't even realize it was coming out until I saw your review. So I think that's what got it on my radar. But yeah, it's very exciting to have another novel from Kazuo Ishiguro. So we're gonna dive into it a little bit. But I guess before we talk about that book, just want to talk about his writing in general, I think. And I mean, it has been so long since Never Let Me Go and Remains of the Day, which I think I read Remains of the Day in high school or college or something like that, like a long time ago, and loved it. It was so, I mean, witty and just, oh, I couldn't put it down. And then Never Let Me Go, I definitely read in college as well. So yeah, so it's been a while. But I feel like the themes, they're similar themes in these books, especially in like being in service to others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's your history with Ishiguro's writing?
I think it's, Remains of the Day is probably the first one that I read. I think I may have actually watched the movie first. Remember the Merchant Ivory production with was it Merchant Ivory? Yeah, with
Anthony.
With Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson, and I love them so much. And I think that made me sort of like go on a binge read of, everything. And then of course, Never Let Me Go. And I actually love one of my favorites of his novels is his debut, The A Pale View of Hills. I don't know if you guys have read that.
No.
It's really fascinating. And from a writing perspective, it's fascinating for me to read because it's sort of like there's a frame story, and the mother in the story who's telling the story is telling a story about a friend of hers in Japan, and she's an immigrant. And it's really interesting sort of at the end. I'm not going to give it away, but because most people probably haven't read this, unlike, his other books. And but there is a very cool thing that happens where you realize, wait, whose story is she telling exactly? And so it's a very cool twist and reveal that is not just a fun twist for the sake of like what happened and sort of like who done it kind of twist, but in terms of sort of the psychological insight that you get into the narrator and why the narrator is choosing to tell the story. And so I feel like he does that a lot with a lot of the stories, that you sort of start thinking about why they're telling the story and when they're telling the story from, and that yields so many insights. It's just the structure,
and what's revealed as the book goes on, because it's from the narrator's perspective when we're seeing it through their eyes.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna sort of dive into the book. Not Never Let Me Go, Klara, and this. We could do a whole other episode about that one. Kelly and Rachel, you have to read that one. But Klara and the Sun. Before we do, Rachel, do you want to read the synopsis? And we can read the synopsis, and then listeners, if you haven't read the book yet and it sounds good and you should go read it, stop listening, go read it, and then come back and listen to the episode, and we will, because we will probably spoil some elements of the story as we discuss.
Definitely.
Yes, so this is the synopsis on the inside flap of the book. From the best-selling author of Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, a stunning new novel, his first since winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, about the wondrous, mysterious nature of the human heart. From her place in the store, Klara, an artificial friend with outstanding observational qualities, watches carefully the behavior of those who come in to browse and of those who pass in the street outside. She remains hopeful as a customer will soon choose her, but when the possibility emerges that her circumstances may change forever, Klara is warned not to invest too much in the promises of humans. In Klara and the Sun, Kazuo Ishiguro looks at our rapidly changing modern world through the eyes of an unforgettable narrator to explore a fundamental question. What does it mean to love?
It's interesting to me that the flap doesn't even talk about Josie. It's really focusing in on the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to me, because to me that's sort of the heart of the story, is sort of her relationship with the family that she goes to.
Yes. Yeah, the beginning is really just the first 30 pages, part 1, where it starts out, she's in the store basically for the AFs, and so we're living in a I guess we would say it's a dystopian future.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, because the children need AFs, the artificial friends, because they don't go to school, because they're being quote unquote lifted, genetically edited, I guess.
Yeah, I was curious because we hear about kids being lifted or unlifted throughout the book, and it's not clear what that is until the end, where they're talking about how they've been genetically modified in some way. Do you think was that clarified at all, exactly what is done to them? Like, if they're, I don't think it's made clear, and we're just supposed to draw our own conclusions.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it's one of these things. It's funny because people, I think, will classify this as kind of sci-fi, but I sort of think of like, it's sci-fi in the same sense that like Time Traveler's Wife is sci-fi. You know what I mean? In that they don't really explore the mechanism behind what's happening, but they use a cool sci-fi premise to sort of explore what the ramifications are.
Right.
So in that sense, I guess it's sci-fi, but I don't think of it like as classic sci-fi, in that it's not really going into the nitty-gritty of what is actually being done to them. But we do know that it is some kind of genetic, fixing and improving, and by virtue of that there is, ramifications of that it comes with risks, that it's not like you just improve and the kids can all of a sudden become smarter and go to good colleges,
right?
But instead they can actually contract illnesses and diseases and potentially die.
Yep, that's true. And I was curious, one question I wanted to ask everyone was, say you were living in this dystopian future, would you want to be lifted knowing the risks and also the other, ramifications on your life socially, and like what class you would be in, basically, or as a parent, what would you choose for your children? Because that's sort of there's a scene at the end with the mother discussing the choice that she made for her children to have them lifted. So, I mean, it seems like an impossible choice, but
it does. And it definitely, the whole thing with the class structure of society plays a big role, because it's not just this thing that's like, oh, well, you could have these genetic improvements, but also there's a big risk you could die from it. But it's also like, well, if you don't do it, you're not going to have the same opportunities as other people. So it definitely is more complicated, I think, than it's hard to imagine. I'm trying to draw a parallel to something that.
Well, I mean, I think in a way it's sort of the extreme version of something that's kind of happening. I mean, in the sense that, this race, especially in places like where I am, right outside DC or New York, or, places like that, where there is such a competition to try to get your kids into the most highly competitive schools. And so as a result, there's tutoring, there's private schools, and then there's also, drugs that so many of these high school students are now using to try to stay up all night and study. And this happens, in my own native country, of Korea. In South Korea, like suicides are rampant because of this pressure and drug abuse and things like that. And I think that that's sort of like, and this is what Ishiguro does, I think, so well, is taking stuff like that and then really drastically putting it out there so that it's an extreme thing, but then have a society that accepts all of those and says, what are the ramifications? I mean, he did the same thing with Never Let Me Go, with cloning, and so I feel like he is doing the same thing here and making it so that we can have these kinds of debates and be like, what would you do if you had to do this, or else your child won't go to college? And what does that mean?
Right, because the other flip side of it is her father lives in a different community away from the family, and it's seen as, I mean, he's debating this, but that's seen as a dangerous, quote unquote, they've kind of like put some fear onto that lifestyle that I wasn't quite sure what was going on, or like what the structure was. But yeah, so there's like some fear, like, oh, you might have to end up going out there because automation has taken all the jobs. So unless you are on this path of being lifted, going to college and following like what we've laid out, then you have to go live on the fringes of society, and good luck to you then.
Right. And we also see that Josie's next door neighbor, Rick, is, he has chosen, his parents chose not to have him lifted. And even though we would probably be like, oh, what a courageous choice, like that's, of course, that's what you should do, but we see that he's now ostracized. He doesn't have friends, and he's not really allowed to sort of go around in the same crowds of friends that he used to have. So it's much more than just going to a good college. It's like your entire social structure just changes.
Right.
What I found interesting was the first time that we see Rick interact with someone outside of Josie's family is at the like party they have for all the kids to come and socialize together. And Josie convinces him to come, even though he's like, I'm not going to fit in because I'm unlifted. And he shows up, and all the parents and kids can tell he's unlifted by just looking at him. Like he doesn't tell anyone he's not lifted.
Do you think they just know who is and who isn't?
I didn't get that impression. I got the impression people could just tell, but maybe I'm wrong. So that made me very curious about what are the side effects. The noticeable side effects.
Right. That's interesting too. Yeah. I thought they just knew.
Like gossip.
Because he's so unusual. Like, oh, his parents can afford it, so why didn't they do that? Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing, is it's only available to, people who can afford it.
Right.
Of course. As all advantages in society.
And now I'm thinking about it, as you say, you can compare it to as a more extreme version of what happens these days. It's like, and what happens these days is just accepted. So we probably would just do it, because if that's what's done, and if it's seen as what's best for the kid, it's scary. But it's like, in this book, it's putting them at physical risk, but in the real world, making them go to all these, having these hectic schedules, putting so much pressure on them, that puts them at a mental risk.
Absolutely. A mental risk. And also, like, the ADHD drugs that the kids are abusing in order to try to become quote unquote smart. those have physical risks too. And
Mhm.
in some ways I think some of the parents like know about it, but they're sort of turning a blind eye and being like, oh well, that's not going to happen, that's not the normal side effect. But
Yeah.
I think we sort of saw that with Josie too, is that what happened to her is not a normal side effect.
Right.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the mythology aspect of it with the sun?
Rachel, you mentioned you wanted to talk about that too.
Oh yeah, I was fascinated by that because from the very beginning, the sun was, I mean, it's almost like a deity to the AF.
Totally. Yes.
And it represents goodness. Like Rosa uses the word goodness to describe sunlight. And Klara just like, she just takes it at face value that the sun can cause miracles. I just thought that was very, very interesting.
Well, I mean, for the AFs, they're clearly solar powered. So,
Exactly.
it is the source of the sun is the source of great things for them.
Mhm.
But it did seem like based on what happened with Josie at the end and the homeless man and the dog, I mean, I don't know what happened.
Right.
It's so
Right.
interesting because I tried to think of, okay, she's interpreting what she saw
Mhm.
as this as the sun, but what really other explanation is there other than it really was this miraculous thing and it was the sun and it's this sort of very mythology driven fable like kind of thing, but it
Mhm.
doesn't seem to be metaphorical. It seems to have been literal, like what
Right.
happened.
Yeah, it definitely that I loved that part at the end with
Me
Josie and the
too.
sun because she's just like, quick, come on, we have to get upstairs to, Rick and the mother. And she's like, come on, quick. And they're like, what are you talking about? She's like, we're gonna miss it. And they run upstairs and she throws open the window shade and the sunlight just pours in and Josie is better. It's
Yeah.
insanely wow.
Did you expect her to get better?
No, I
No.
I
thought it
didn't
was just,
either. I didn't either. I thought it
no.
was gonna be like they were gonna be so
Yeah.
disappointed. And yeah.
And then I thought what was going to, because Klara sacrifices part of her body
Yes.
to because she wants to break the Cootings machine, which is causing
Yeah.
pollution. And so she
Yeah.
thinks if she can break that machine, the sun will shine on Josie and make her better. And so she has to give up part of her some liquid that's part of the machinery that powers her. And she uses that to somehow inflict damage onto this machine. That plan doesn't work necessarily the way she thought it would. But I thought what was going to happen was even with the sun's shining on Josie would still die. And then Klara would also be either, perish or be just like malfunctioning so much that because the mother has this crazy plan to, that Klara is then going to take Josie's place. But then I was worried that the mother would abandon Klara because she wasn't what she wanted. And so that was my fear reading the book. And then I was very happy that it didn't end up like that. It's interesting though, when you say the mythology of the sun, when I was reading the book, I was really looking for the logical scientific reasoning behind everything. And I didn't even think about, oh, it's mythology. There's no explanation. It's a miracle. I was like, no, there must be some reason that this condition, like whatever they do to genetically modify them, for some reason, the sun helps them. But you're right. I mean, maybe there is no explanation. We're left not knowing.
I mean, it is possible, I guess. You're right. It could be that whatever lifting does, that sort of the sun does something.
Like maybe
to
they're
power
implanted
them.
with some
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
solar powered thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so
And they don't realize it.
yeah, or they might realize it, they might not realize it, who knows. Yeah, but you're right, they probably wouldn't realize it, because if they did, why wouldn't they just do that
Right.
themselves?
Right.
Maybe the
But
homeless man was like a first generation lifted person.
Oh.
But like things went wrong with it, and so like he was kind of shunned from society, and that's
Wow.
kind of how he went on this,
yeah,
you know, and that's why the sun revived him.
right. Or it could just be that was, I mean, I really did think that the homeless man thing was like
Yeah,
a complete
coincidence.
coincidence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, me
I was
too.
just like, oh, I mean, but then when the same thing happened with Josie, I was like, wait, well, maybe there is something to this, which I would love to believe.
That would be great.
And I think I thought mythology immediately because of the way that she described the son and where he goes in the barn and he goes to live there. That is exactly the kind of thing that, like sort of Greek mythology or Roman mythology, those types of, the deities that go to sleep somewhere and things like that. And there's also a very cool um uh what is it called, Star Trek and the Next Generation. I don't know if you guys are fans at all, but remember there was this one episode that had to do with the sun and the moon, and they were fighting each other, and Data sort of became the sun or the moon, and he had like weird shapes pop up on his forehead. Do you remember this?
Yeah, vaguely.
So I totally thought back to that the entire time. He was talking about the sun going to the barn and them walking to the barn to try to meet the sun and figure out how the sun was being pulled in by the chariot, and the underworld and the staircase to the underworld, all that kind of stuff.
No, it's totally true. She did address and think about the sun in that way. For sure.
Yeah. It's
I thought she was, oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just saying I had definitely was very suspicious of the whole what the sun represented from the beginning, when she reached her hand out to where the sun's pattern was on the floor and it faded immediately. And I'm like, okay, probably someone just like a cloud came by or something.
Yeah.
But the boy AF was like, oh, you're so greedy. You took it all. And she's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And then the next page is when Rosa says, what does she say? She says, Klara, do you think once we're in the window, we'll receive so much goodness we'll never get short again? And goodness being sunlight. So that was what really made me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, what were you going to say?
Yeah.
I thought honestly as I was reading it, like, oh, this is so sweet. She thinks that, when the sun goes into the barn as it's setting, like he's actually there. And she, like it's an actual person.
Yeah.
But I also think it also makes sense because this is a different part obviously, but I think they need the artificial friends because they don't have real friends. Everyone else is a competitor. Right. And then you have, of course, they don't know that sunlight helps these people after they're lifted, because there's no way the parents are like, hey, you've been working really hard, go play outside. It's, like it's never, they probably never are outside more than what, like 4 minutes a day tops, probably.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the thing about the mythology and how the AFs in the store were sort of misinterpreting some of the stuff. I think that's just such a fascinating way that we see how myths develop, right? Because we see it happening with the AFs in their society, and how these social constructs develop over time, and how they use these types of stories and these narratives, and how they invent them in order to sort of make sense of things that might happen, that might just be, just nothing, things that just happen.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. the AF. Yeah, Kelly, you're right. I didn't even think about how they needed AF because they can't be friends with each other.
Yeah.
Because of how the world is just set up so that everything is a competition. Except if you're living, I guess, in one of the communities that the dad moved to, it seems like there's more of a community aspect in that case.
Right.
But that makes sense too, because at that point, like, you've already got your job and your family, and you don't really need to compete anymore. You've won, I guess, if that's what you consider winning.
Yeah.
Well, I think since it seems like their entire lives for the kids is, the goal is to get into the best college you can. And so given that, that's why they don't need AFs after they get into college, because that would mean that they can actually be friends with these people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
This book did prompt me to have like conversations with my partner about religion, and like, because I think this book is definitely a commentary on what it means to be human. And Kelly, I know you were mentioning this before too, like, can you fully imitate someone else perfectly? Because that's the question on everyone's mind. And I think that parallels with the character of Klara, who to me is very human, even though she's not technically biologically human. She has feelings and thoughts that, to me, I think she has a soul. And that was what it came down to for me, is because I think, like, being human, I don't know what I believe fully, like, about God, and that's, I think, a lifelong journey, but I do believe I have a soul, and I think that's part of what makes me me. And so I don't know that I think that anyone could perfectly imitate me. And there was a question in one of the reading guides I found that when Paul, the dad, is sharing a moment of concern about the mom's plan, it says that he doesn't believe that Klara would have the ability to truly learn Josie's heart, which he describes as rooms within rooms within rooms. No matter how long you wandered through these rooms, wouldn't there always be others you'd not yet entered? And like, even for ourselves, there are probably rooms within me that I haven't explored, but that still influence who I am and the decisions I make. So yeah, Kelly, I know you had that question too, like, can we fully imitate someone? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's two different things, really. Because, I mean, yeah, like, I think we all have things about ourselves that we haven't explored, which is really the whole point of therapy, to understand why you do what you do and how to break bad patterns, whatever. But my best friend Jen, we've been friends since we were like little, so 34 years at this point. And I'm pretty sure that if you just heard her voice saying things that I would say, you would probably think it was me. And we've been friends for so long that it would be a credible imitation.
Yeah.
People might like it better. I don't know. We'll explore that next week. But
but even if you can, but perfect imitation, that is the whole thing. I mean, and this is why I said in my review, and this was something I couldn't really go into, is that I feel like this book is sort of the other side of the coin as far as Never Let Me Go, because they're both trying to improve humans and improve human longevity. And I think in Never Let Me Go, they do it through physical cloning. I mean, not in that sense, but taking clones and then, using the organ donations to try to, physically replace things that the person no longer has. And this is trying to do the opposite, where you are taking something and then trying to imitate it from the opposite side, not the physical part, but you're actually trying to have this artificial being take over for somebody else's life who might be gone, as a comfort to the people who are remaining. And I feel like in both ways, you're trying to elongate human life. And the question is, does that actually work? And I think in organ donation, we do that already. And so that's one thing. But then this is doing it from the opposite side. And I don't think it does, because even if you can perfectly imitate someone, you look exactly like them, the mom would still know.
Mhm.
Right. It's not like, yeah, because she's the one who initiated it.
Right. And it might, and even if, like, let's say that this happened such that the mom didn't know, or she could have her memory modified so she forgets, and, or the dad never knows, so he doesn't,
She could
realize
tell.
that she's, but even if so, I mean, the person who's gone is gone,
Mhm.
so for that person, the actual person herself, Josie, she's gone. So
Yeah.
she can't be replaced.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, okay, so say Klara learns everything she needs to know about Josie and is able to perfectly imitate Josie at the time of Josie's death. But people evolve and become, they
Yeah.
change over time. So she wouldn't know the future. Klara wouldn't know the future of how Josie would change. And thus, like, it would be Klara going forward. It would not be
Right.
Josie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
Klara acting like Josie and
Mhm.
looking like Josie.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you all think about how people treated Klara in the book? Because like I was saying before, we see her as human because the story's told from her perspective. We know she has feelings and is so observant and able to process things. So we know from the beginning, she's not like the same as a piece of furniture, but I mean, the things people say to her in this book are wild, like, oh,
It
it's just
hurt my
like,
feelings for her.
Mhm.
yeah.
She was called a vacuum cleaner like 3 different times by different people, I
Yeah.
think.
But she didn't get upset by it at
No.
all, because
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
she
interesting.
feels like, well, I am. She's very factual about it. She's very accepting of the fact that she's not, human.
Mm-hmm.
And she is, I mean, she's such in service of humans, and she accepts that as her role and as her destiny, whatever you want to call it. And she also thinks that by accepting that fully, she will be actually better for it, like, because she's then fulfilling her purpose, which is so sad. But I felt the same way with Stevens in Remains of the Day too.
Yeah.
When
Oh yeah, Stevens.
he was such the perfect servant, and you feel like, but you shouldn't do that. You need to have your own individuality in your own life, and that's the tragedy of the book.
Yeah, but I mean, there's even the one part where the mother says, "Oh, don't worry, Josie. There's plenty of room in the car. You won't have to ride in the trunk."
Right.
That was an option? What?
Yeah.
But yeah, because she doesn't technically need oxygen. She's
Yeah.
technically a machine. They could do that. It's just, yeah.
I did think I agree with you, Angie. However, I do think there is one part where Klara, her feelings about the way she's being treated supersedes her, need to please her humans. And that's during the social gathering.
Yep.
When all the kids who are bullies are talking about, oh, let's throw her around, do this, do that.
Right.
Josie's kind of giving her commands, but Klara's like, I don't think she means it. And she kind of just zones out.
Yeah.
It just like mentally leaves the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Her survival instincts really kick in there too, I think.
True.
Definitely.
Because they could have hurt her.
Yeah.
Based on what they were saying, I think. Yeah.
What did you think of Josie? Did you guys like her?
Sometimes. I mean, like any kid, I guess, right? Like sometimes she seems really cool, and a lot of times she seems selfish and kind of awful. Like people, I guess.
Mhm.
She's just like everyone else, but
Yeah.
I mean, she's definitely a 14-year-old and she's dying,
Yeah.
She's pretty sure she's gonna die. And I cannot imagine being a young kid who like knows you're going to die or thinks you're going to die. And it's like, I would probably be cross a lot of the time too.
Yeah. I guess it was just I feel like Klara sacrificed so much for her.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to have acknowledgement of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I understand if, she doesn't need her at the end and she's fulfilled, you're not supposed to take AFs to college or whatever. But I feel like she just doesn't, even in the very beginning when she was in the store, she really saved herself for Josie, and by virtue of that almost missed out on being adopted or whatever it's called, altogether. And so she really just she sort of fell in love with her. I think Klara did with Josie, and Josie just never really returned it fully. It was more like an infatuation or like a crush or friendship or something, and it just made me feel like you just don't deserve Klara. Like, I don't know who does deserve Klara. Maybe
No, I don't
Rick.
think anyone does.
You know what? I think Rick deserves Klara.
Yep.
Right, because Josie also took a lot of her frustrations out on Rick, who was a very good friend to her as well. But unlike Klara, would not just obey Josie at every turn, no matter what. He stood up for himself and put up boundaries that, Klara didn't, because she doesn't feel the need to. But but you could see, I agree with you, Rachel, that her anger at her situation is driving a lot of Josie's bad behavior, but it was frustrating a lot. And I think my biggest problem was during that party when she did let those kids, even though Klara could tell deep down Josie doesn't mean it, the fact that Josie still didn't say, stop, don't do that, was really disappointing to me.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Like, she could have spoken out, even if she framed it as though like, hey, that's my property, don't damage my things, but I think she wanted to be liked by the kids. And, and I think, and it goes back to the conversation we were having about just in general how AFs are treated, and they're just seen as machines or things rather than sentient beings, which they are sentient.
Both Klara and Rick are treated as less than, and I think that's kind of why they bond the way that they do, because they're looked down upon for different reasons.
Right, which is interesting because, both Rick and Klara are pure beings, right? Klara is purely artificial. Rick is purely biological, and the kids that are the hybrids are the ones that are, seen as the superior race. And so that's
true.
Yeah, that's interesting that you need that human tinkering. Otherwise, if you're purely biological and you're just natural, then you're just not as sophisticated. And yet you have the most sophisticated one right there, who's Klara, who's all like that, and yet she is not seen as worthy either. So it's very funny. It goes to show that there's really no logic and no system behind their discrimination. They're just doing it because that's who they are and they have the power.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I found the moms really interesting in this book, both Josie's mom, whose name I can't remember right now.
She's just the mother. She's
just the mother. Yeah.
No, I call her something.
They call her Chrissy, I think.
Chrissy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but Klara just thinks of her as the
Klara
mother.
Klara.
I love how she says things like mother's coffee, like morning, like that sort of thing. So there's Klara, Josie's mother, Chrissy, and then there's Miss Helen, right? Rick's mother.
Yeah.
And they both make choices for their kids that at one point or another are seen as immoral in some way. So Josie's mom gets her lifted, and then also Rick's mom tries to like reach out to an ex to like help him like use connections to get into college. And I was like, I have no problem with Miss Helen doing that. Like use your network, call that ex, blame. And but Rick has like a real problem with it, which I just was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I loved Miss Helen.
Yeah, no, Miss Helen was great.
Yeah.
But that cafe scene was
so
very, very upsetting.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
That could have been planned a little bit better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Rick.
any
I
other?
really like Rick so much.
I know.
I think other than Klara, he's my favorite character.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Did anyone have any other like questions or things they wanted to talk about?
The ending? What do you think? What about the ending?
The slow fade.
Yeah.
I know what that means.
Yeah, what is the slow fade? I assume it's just as a machine eventually.
Just wearing out.
Right.
Degrade, yeah. You just degrade away and
But is her intelligence, because it's like her brain is more like a computer than in like, is that fading as well? It was hard to tell.
I don't think it was.
Yeah, because she's just like kind of stuck in that yard. She called it the yard.
yeah.
But she still seems as observant and
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I assume that at some point it will sort of degrade, like, you know, and corrode over time and things. And it's interesting that when you're in a situation like that, I mean, it made me think a little bit of like, you know, nursing homes and things, especially if the older person is, you know, has dementia. You know, it just seems sort of like the kind of thing that can sometimes happen, and it sort of seems like a stark version of that.
Yeah.
So far as I know, each AF fades after their person has gone to college. I think they're supposed to be obsolete, so families keep having to get new ones. I am interpreting it as her body isn't getting sun, so she just starts to slowly shut down. And her mind is there, I think, but you know, since the body isn't working, I think it's intact but sleeping. And then I guess if she gets sunlight, she would come back and be okay. But maybe that's just because I don't want to think of her as faded entirely. Like I like to think that maybe she's just sort of sleeping a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how manager was there at the end.
Yes.
Because I assumed that at the store, I assumed that the AFs are somehow awakened and programmed by manager or whoever to like get them going, like turn them on, and then like put them in the window or put them in the store. So I imagine that manager ushered her into the world and also assisted in her exit. And I found that really poignant.
Yeah, so she's essentially like her mother.
Yeah.
Way.
Or even some sort of like guardian angel, you know. Yeah.
And it's I thought it was interesting that it was the manager and not, you know, Josie or the mother or Josie's mother who came to visit at the end. Because, you know, at the end I sort of feel like it's this idea of like whoever takes care of you, your caretaker when you're young, you know, like your mother, your family is the one that's with you. And even if you've been adopted into the family, really you were just a servant, you were a functionary, and you weren't really family, even though they of course said that, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What a beautiful book. Well, what rating did you all give the book? Angie?
5 out of 5.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
you and me. Yeah,
We know.
I said I said full, like whatever the rating scale is, it would be the highest on that for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Rachel, you too?
Yeah, 5 stars for me.
5 stars for me.
I think for me it is pretty close to 5, but I would give it 4 or 4.5, only because there were a couple of times in the book where I felt for me the pacing was a little slow, and I just understand why the whole book was told from Klara's perspective. We needed that, and that's how we went on the journey. But if maybe I just was curious about other perspectives, I thought that would have been interesting. But I mean, it is an amazing book, so I'd probably 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah. I mean, I think he does that really well, as far as just inhabiting one person's perspective. I mean, even in like Remains of the Day, where you really want to know what's her name, I can't remember, Emma Thompson's character, what you would have loved to have seen some of the scenes from her perspective, and and Never Let Me Go for sure, like from Ruth or Tommy. But I think there's a value in that, which is that you really get to experience it the way that one being does, and we never have perspectives into other characters, not in a full way. And I think especially for here, because Klara was so different from the humans, and and how she sort of comes to learn about the world, I think there was just such questions about sort of like epistemology and those types of things, that if we had somebody else's perspective, I think it would have actually maybe taken away, because we would have gotten explanations about like the sun, and stuff like that would have possibly disappointed us, I think.
Right. And it is nice that because it's all from Klara's perspective, and she is so factual and just sort of observant and just like, here are the facts of what's happening. We get to interpret that, and we get to look at that through her lens, but also our own. So it prompts more questions. And wow. Well, thanks again so much for joining us, Angie. This was such a great discussion. We could probably talk all day about this book, but we don't want to keep you. And we do want to encourage our listeners to go and read your book, Miracle Creek. And where can people find you on social media or on the internet?
Oh, sure. So on social media, on Twitter, I'm on Angie Kim Writer. On Instagram, I am, Angie Kim ASK.
Yep.
And on Facebook, I'm angiekim.va. And for Virginia, which is where I am. And my website is angiekimbooks.com. I feel like I should have really done a better job when I was setting up all of my social media handles.
We'll link it down below.
The same one, but oh well.
It's okay.
Yeah.
People can go on a hunt and find it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat.
For sure.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show. Book of the Month has its April picks up. You can get your first box for $9.99 with the promo code What You Should Read, all one word.
Yes, and be sure to follow us on social media. We are at WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. And please give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It's really helpful, and it'll help other people find our show. And And
now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your